Hello everybody, welcome to today's show. My name is Spencer Walsh. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We got a good one for you as always. We start today with the Russia-Ukraine war, getting you updated on some of the latest proceedings there, as some pretty embarrassing moments for Russia, but really the big top-line story, 31 M1 Abrams tanks are going to Ukraine. Big news and a big step in our continuing armament and support, military support of the Ukrainian people. Take a look at what that means, how they may use it, and just pretty much what the future holds as far as that is concerned. Meanwhile, Republicans have named their price to raise the debt ceiling as they hold what should not be, I think, really kind of a part of American policy hostage to get their own best wishes and kind of legislative demands through. We'll take a look at what their demands are there, but we head to Chicago after that for a very interesting, very important story where the police already are planning to make police-critical left-wing incoming Mayor Brandon Johnson's life a living hell. We'll take a look at how they plan to do that, and an interesting new audio out of Nashville, Tennessee, is highlighting some new information on the GOP plan to stop people from voting on college campuses. Take a look at that. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's show. Got a good one for you as always. But yeah, we're starting with a very, very interesting and important story here. M1 Abrams tanks heading into Ukraine. So we started with this here. This is from the New York Times. It's really going to be a pretty remarkable step. Ukrainian troops will begin training on American M1 Abrams tanks in Germany in the next few weeks, U.S. defense officials say, in what will be a major step in arming Kyiv. The Defense Secretary Lloyd J. Austin made the announcement on Friday morning during a meeting with allies at Ramstein Air Base. U.S. defense officials said that about 31 tanks were expected to arrive in Germany to kick off a training program for Ukrainian troops that's expected to take 10 weeks. The tanks could reach the battlefields in Ukraine by fall, they said the officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss security matters. And this is kind of goes a little bit with what we saw in the Pentagon leaks, some of the Discord leaks, the Pentagon leaks, whatever you want to call them. This is it kind of goes a little bit off of that. This is the effort, this is the continued push by both certain elements of the United States government and really the Ukrainian government to get these kind of continuous current, this constant flow of just weaponry, of all that kind of stuff, just gradually escalating more and more, just to more and more lethal weaponry until eventually, there's the holy grail or those fighter jets. I think is really what Zelensky's after, these long range missiles as well. Just anything that's really going to have A, control of the air, and B, power to for the Ukrainians to strike into Russian territory. I think that is definitely where this is headed. Yeah, so I'm confident that this equipment and the training that accompanies it will put Ukraine's forces in position to succeed on the battlefield, said Austin in a news conference standing alongside General Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. General Milley said the M1 tanks coming in are training tanks, so they are not combat ready. But he added, I do think the M1 tank, when it's delivered, will make a difference. This is a vastly accelerated timetable from what the Pentagon had initially projected, and officials say it means the Abrams tanks could get to Ukraine in time to play a part in the counteroffensive. Ukraine is expected to launch soon. The counteroffensive is expected to begin in weeks, and the Abrams tanks could arrive to help Ukrainian troops to hold on to recaptured territory, one of the officials said. So yeah, that's definitely something that is really the occurrent, and really what the Pentagon leaks kind of suggests is, because you really, in this situation, you kind of do have to kind of play one off against the other. You have to kind of get a better sense of, to get a better sense of where people are, where the currents of the war is, and really what they're not telling you, because, just basic common sense and really the Pentagon leaks have also confirmed that the government is going to lie to you on this, and they're not going to tell you. They're just going to, maybe it's a lie by omission, maybe they're, just spinning. But the truth is, what they're telling you is different from the reality on the ground, and the reality on the ground is really suggestive of the fact that if they had not gotten these weapons, and they had not gotten some severe support in a very, very quick manner, especially with regards to support in the air, especially some stronger firepower like these tanks. Like that is something that's going to be absolutely huge to. It's going to be absolutely huge to kind of turning the tide of this war, and especially given how much ammo, how much equipment damage Ukrainians are taking. Like there is real legitimate question of how this counteroffensive would have gone if they had really been able to even pull it off, had there not been more support from the United States. That we already know they're really running out of ammo on a rapid clip. I guess pun intended there. But it does seem like they're really going to require some more U.S. support here. Defense officials had initially said they would not arrive until Ukraine until next year. But since January, when the Biden administration announced it would send tanks, senior defense officials have said they wanted to speed up that timeline. Austin, during remarks at U.S.-led talks with top defense officials from more than 40 nations, a collective known as the Ukraine Contact Group, said the continued deliveries of weapon systems and ammunition and tanks to Kiev underscored just how badly the Kremlin miscalculated. So yeah, it looks like they're kind of juicing up support, kind of continuing to push Ukraine towards this counteroffensive, as they really are. There seem to be a pretty big, pretty significant moment coming up for the war in these next few weeks as they look to kind of push Russia out of the just bare last little bit. It is a pretty substantial bit, but the bit of southeastern Ukraine that they are still occupying, perhaps push them back into Crimea, maybe go even a little bit further. That's when things are really starting to get interesting. But yeah, the counteroffensive, which according to this article is expected to begin in the next few weeks, is going to be pretty important, pretty interesting to watch for sure. He praised the Austin praised the Ukraine Contact Group for its commitment to reject efforts to divide us. Many of the countries in the group are NATO members. The group has met regularly at their base for the past year to discuss and coordinate military and humanitarian aid to Ukraine. That's from Helen Cooper in the New York Times. And meanwhile, things. Let's take a look at how the other side's doing. Ukraine, U.S. Not exact. In the absolute best scenario, they're having to speed these weapons along. Things don't seem to be going well as they could have been with Ukrainian defense in the losses that they may be taking. But still, I'd much rather be Ukraine than Russia here, because take a look at this. A Russian warplane accidentally dropped a bomb on one of its own cities, the Russian Defense Ministry said on Friday. That's quite embarrassing. The blast, which video showed hit a near apartment block, Oh my God, wounded 3 people and spread panic in a major city along the border in Ukraine. This is central Belgorod, a southern Russian city with 400,000 people just across the border of Ukraine. Widely circulated video footage showed a burst of smoke and flames near an intersection that cars were passing through, sending one parked vehicle twirling through the air. Suspicion initially fell on Ukraine since the beginning of the war last year. Russian authorities have blamed Ukraine for a string of covert attacks on railway bridges and other strategic targets in Belgorod. The attacks have put Belgorod on edge, and some residents have said they're worried Ukrainians might even invade. And I think if they had the weapons, if they had the ability, those train bridge explosions, some of the other sabotage that we've seen, that blowing up that bridge, I think in Crimea, Nord Stream, you can point to a million different examples like that suggest that, hey, if they had the resources, if they had the go-ahead from above to invade, they probably would. But, on Friday morning here today, the Russian Defense Ministry released a statement saying that the explosion was caused by an accidental discharge of aviation ammunition by a Russian fighter jet. That's like that SpaceX explosion yesterday, saying it was a rapid, unscheduled. SpaceX says the rocket, accidentally bombing your own city and calling it an accidental discharge of aviation ammunition is like launching a rocket, having it explode, and calling it an rapid, unscheduled disassembly, which is kind of funny what they were calling it yesterday out of SpaceX. But on Friday morning, they released that statement. Vyacheslav Gladkov, the governor of the Belgorod region, said 3 people have been injured, including one who suffered a concussion. The blast shook a nearby apartment so badly that local authorities had to evacuate it. But everyone obviously happy that no one died. Really just a pretty embarrassing moment for Russia. And I really think that one that, like, really firmly, highlights, in case we didn't have any doubt, how, disorganized, how dysfunctional, and really incapable they are of mounting any kind of severe response, or, just the fact that they, with Ukraine, like, they probably could have pushed through had there been absolutely no U.S. support, but they, of course there would have been U.S. support, like, duh, obviously, like, that is not, that's something, if you're going to invade Ukraine, that's something you got to factor in, it's part of the equation. So, and the fact they either didn't factor it in, or they didn't have the resources to get the job done, simple as that. Then we can kind of understand really why that they are in the situation they're in. Boris Rosin, a pro-Russian military analyst and blogger, suggested in a post on Telegram the accident could have been the result of a malfunction in a GPS guidance kit attached to a munition carried by the Su-34. Ukrainian officials and military analysts say that Moscow is using kits in an effort to turn unguided munitions into cheap substitutes for precision aerial weapons. The kits are still raw and can easily malfunction, possibly leading to accidents like the one in Belgorod, Rosin wrote. So it's certainly a possible explanation. As the Russian weapons continue to malfunction, the Ukrainians continue to get more weapons rushed to them from their friends in the West. Meanwhile, House Republicans back in Washington have finally made their demands for raising the debt, and it's not going to be pretty. Speaker Kevin McCarthy was at the New York Stock Exchange yesterday, and he gave a speech outlining some of the demands. Contrary to expectations, McCarthy did not tie demands for cuts to Social Security and Medicare to an agreement to raise the debt ceiling. So what do Republicans want to put on the chopping block? Their proposal would undo Biden's partial student loan cancellation, which is already tied up in court, as well as moratorium on collecting student debt. They also want to roll back parts of the Inflation Reduction Act and cut money that's supposed to go to the Internal Revenue Service to increase enforcement on the rich. Wow, taking apart one of the better things that Biden has ever done. Getting, and of course, not doing the blatantly unpopular thing. Like, they're stupid. They're stupid enough to keep pushing with abortion because of the evangelicals in the party. But they're not stupid enough to, at least not yet, to go after Social Security and Medicare. They did take a little bit of a chunk out of Medicaid, though. This so far, seems to be pretty much a fantasy program. Like, I feel like the idea that Biden is going to kind of get after let the Inflation Reduction Act go that easily. He may not care about the student loans because that's already in deep trouble in the courts, but it does seem like that is going to be pretty rough. So they're planning to make it significantly harder for people to access Medicaid, food stamps, temporary assistance for needy families, and other things. One in 4, I think, people under these proposals would be kicked off of food stamps. People already in the Republican Party are going to be very uncomfortable with that, because Kevin McCarthy, Republicans, they see they have a very big opportunity here to, because the debt ceiling is just something that has to be raised. Otherwise, the economy will go off a cliff, essentially. It's just something that has to happen. And that is something that a lot of people have been kind of freaking out about. So they, in the Republican Party, they've seen this opportunity, they've sensed it, and they want to kind of get something for it just because they can, and it's just a power play, which is something that Biden should kind of take away, I think, from the Republicans. So Jerome Powell has kind of hinted that he would follow along with efforts to mint this $1 trillion coin that would raise the debt ceiling forever. Beyond all amounts. So Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell said he was up to that. Probably doesn't want any of this chaos in his precious markets. But McCarthy is and the rest of the Republican caucus really sensing a pretty big opportunity, which is that they can get something out of the Democrats for this because they're the Democrats. But if you were paying attention back in January when he was going through his speakership challenge, he has a pretty divided caucus. It's going to be pretty hard for him to push through because he needs pretty much unified Republican support on all these things he's going to want to make for demands of the Democrats. And already we are seeing some conflict between the hard right, the Tea Partiers, the people, the Matt Gaetzes, the Jim Jordans of the world, the people who are really making life hell for Kevin McCarthy in the speakership process. They're the people that want to go after the IRS. They're the people that want to go after food stamps, temporary assistance for needy families. They want to cut when it comes to that kind of stuff. But, he also has all these kind of recent gains. McCarthy did very well in the House in New York. And a lot of those the reasons why the Republicans have the majority at this point are those people in New York. These are, what Nancy Pelosi would call frontline members, people who are kind of have to be more moderate, can't be all in line with the party because of the base. They're like, for example, northern New York City, those areas are now represented by Republicans for the most part, because of really how incredibly bad the New York Democrats are. And they are not liking some of this food stamp cuts. So that is already an indication that some of this goes down. But, if anything like this passes, if anything close to this passes, this is all in exchange for for Kevin McCarthy saying, okay, we'll raise the debt limit for a year, and then in a year's time, we're going to come after you again, which is really pretty crazy. As close as these demands are, there isn't much surprising in making them. Making it hard to collect taxes on the rich and making life difficult for the poor and young on principle is pretty Republican standard fare. What's notable here, if not completely new, is the extent to which Kevin McCarthy and the House GOP are attempting to push the policies through with the threat of crashing the economy. With a slim majority in the House and with Democrats in control of the White House and the Senate, Republicans really don't have any kind of a major mandate for social spending, or severe cuts to social spending. That leaves them with the structural leverage of the debt ceiling. Really, that's it. Threatening to tank the government's credit and causing unpredictable economic problems if they don't get their way. Joe Biden and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer both called McCarthy's proposal a non-starter. They've shown some pretty surprising and commendable consistency in refusing to negotiate spending cuts in exchange for raising the debt ceiling, saying, hey, this is just illegitimate. The move you're trying to pull here, the trade you're trying to make is illegitimate. We're not going to, put the debt ceiling into kind of political discussion, put it on the table here, because even that, right, is a concession for McCarthy. McCarthy also faces the challenge of keeping a very slim and fractious majority in the House united, which perhaps explains leaving Medicare and Social Security off the table for now. Both sides will probably have to give something up to avoid default, but McCarthy, while McCarthy probably won't give anything and everything that he wants, simply setting the president for extracting concessions with the debt default before budget negotiations would be a significant win for austere forces. Ideally, Democrats will maintain their line on no negotiations, but it's impossible to predict if they really will. Spoiler alert, they probably almost certainly won't when it's faced with the prospect of immense economic pain a default would cause under their watch. So let's now go to our next story. It's a pretty big and pretty important one after this.
It's the Spencer Walsh Radio Network.
Oh, baby. Going to buck in the latest trap. Got stopped by a lady cop. She got me thinking I could date a cop. Cause her uniform pants so tight. She read me my rights. She put me in a pile. She cut apart the light. She said I have the right to remain silent. Now I gotta holler. Sounding like a siren.
Spencer Walsh Radio Network. And we move through to a pretty important story out of Chicago. This is in Jacobin. In late March, as Paul Vallis's grip on the Chicago mayoral race was slipping away, the city's Fraternal Order of Police President John Catanzara, I guess, Catanzara? Whatever. Catanzara. That's what I'm going to go with. Catanzara. How about that? So if this guy gets in, is what he said, I'm talking about leftist, Warren Democrat, essentially, Brandon Johnson. If this guy gets in, we're going to see an exodus like we never seen before, said Catanzara to the New York Times, predicting that 800 to 1,000 police officers would walk off the job. if Johnson was elected. Then he promised there would be blood in the streets. Chicagoans were not impressed with Catanzara's threat. 8 days after the article in the Times published, Johnson, a former teachers union organizer who ran a progressive campaign calling for a holistic approach to public safety, beat Vallas by more than 4 percentage points, running up the score in areas of the city that have been severely affected by violent crime over the last 5 years. So, like, this is a clear as hell Democratic mandate that, in a functioning society, that would be like, okay, this guy who the police, who is, one of the people leading, kind of calling out the police for, doing some of the things that they have been doing, calling them out, ran a campaign explicitly and expressly on calling them out. He got he won. He won by a pretty good margin. In Chicago, it's a lot of very, very close races there a lot of the time. And the fact is, he won in some of the areas that are most affected by crime. Like, the people who you are failing have said, okay, we need Brandon Johnson to come in here and do his best job. Few people believe that 1,000 police officers are actually about to walk off the job, but even if they don't, city's police may push Johnson in other ways, testing the mayor's new commitment to holistic public safety and the strength of the movement that elected him. As candidate, Johnson backed away from the defund the police demand and said he would not make cuts to the police department budget, but he would also make clear that no amount of policing will result in true safety. He may also make clear his understanding that no amount of policing will result in true safety. The public safety section of Johnson's campaign website lamented over the failures of the past that have been repeated over and over, while stating the road to lasting safety in Chicago starts with reversing decades of underinvestment in youth mental health services and victim support. I think this is going to be one of the biggest, probably one of the kind of biggest, important angles to this. And one of the early indications that this guy's kind of for real is there was like this, I guess, some altercation of some youths getting up to no good in Chicago like last weekend. This is like maybe like a week or two after he's elected, maybe a week or two before he kicks off. It's still very much, he's in the transition period right now, Brandon Johnson is. But nevertheless, he was already being pushed. It obviously makes sense because he's about to be the mayor, but he was very, very clear in saying, hey, when the people ask him, hey, Mr. Johnson, Mayor-elect Johnson, what do you think about this? He was like, okay, I understand it's wrong, but we're not going to, it's not good. I condemn what happened, just to get it out of the way for the headlines. But, the big thing is, he says, criminalizing youth, demonizing youth is not going to solve the problems. And what young people do on a day-to-day basis is not going to solve the problems. We need, broader focus, broader look, get a better understanding here. So yeah, that I think was a big moment where a lot of mayors under the pressure would be like, I completely condemn this. We need to take, a stronger look. And, in Philadelphia, they're putting like curfews on shopping centers in the mayoral race there, which is pretty incredible. Only Helen Gim refusing to support that in the debate recently, pretty big. But yeah, Johnson has promised to train 200 new detectives and fill outstanding positions on the police force, but he's also committed to ending no-knock warrants, canceling the contracts of the city with ShotSpotter. I don't know what that exactly is. Erasing the police department's racist gang database and erecting a memorial to survivors of torture perpetrated by former police commander John Burge and his subordinates. He may not openly support defunding the police department as of now, but as of 2020, when he introduced a non-binding resolution on the Cook County Board to redirect police funding to social services, he certainly grasped the overarching concept. I think if he had come out explicitly of defunding the police, it definitely would have made it harder for him to win. So, it's going to be very interesting to see what he takes to the police budget cuts to social services, because, I think, running around saying we need to defund the police, there needs to be no more police, than saying, okay, look, police are the most heavily funded, part of the budget in pretty much every major city in America. If we cut, 10% of that, if we cut 15% of that year over year, over like a 10-year period, and put that towards social programs, that would not be a bad thing. I think there's a really big difference between point one of defund and abolition and point two of cut and relocate. But it's going to be interesting to see how Brandon Johnson handles all that. It's certainly clear that he's supportive of it, but had to limit himself. But the election results here certainly bore out a more radical position. And it's easy to understand why Chicagoans, presented with a coherent and thoughtful alternative strategy for crime prevention, voted in the way they did. The Chicago Police Department already has a budget of nearly $2 billion, which city's Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability has said it does not use effectively or equitably because it, like so many police departments, has failed to produce a long-term, data-driven strategy to reduce violence. The department also has personnel issues that long predate Johnson's election. A WGN report published on January that found that more than 1,000 officers left the force in 2022, which also kind of put some context into Catanzara's claim, the fact that, hey, they may have been leaving already. 35% of those officers resigning as opposed to retiring of those 1,000. Nevertheless, Chicago has one of the highest police per capita highest rates of police per capita in any major city in the country. If more police equated to safety, we'd be the safest city in the country, says Aislinn Pulley, co-executive director of Chicago Torture Justice Center, and we're not. Voters appear to be catching on, and Catanzara himself probably isn't helping in terms of the public relations. He's kind of a caricature of a kind of racist old police boss. Despite Vallis's failure at the polls and the myriad of issues dogging the department, Catanzara and the CPD rank and file may try and make Johnson's life as mayor pretty darn difficult. They could accomplish that with an array of tactics that police in cities across the country have dabbled in over the last several years. Perhaps the clearest example of a police response to a perceived political threat came in Minneapolis, where the weeks following the murder of George Floyd by Derek Chauvin, the city council vowed to defund the city's police department and replace it with an entirely new Department of Public Safety. The backlash from the police department was swift. In protest, officers really stopped doing major parts of their job. And it really shows you, I think this is something that really needs to be made clear to people. I think it really does show you the role that police actually play in society. They are the enforcers for the powerful. They are kind of like the tip of the spear. And beyond that tip, or behind that tip, is, all the most powerful people in the given locality, whether it be, the developers, whether it be the Chamber of Commerce people, whether it be, the political establishment. They are all 100% behind this. And, they are people who have a lot of control of the city. They are people who enjoy and got in this job because they enjoy meting out power over you. An investigation conducted by Reuters found that in the year following Floyd's murder, the number of people approached on the street by Minneapolis police officers dropped by 76%, while the response time to emergency calls increased by 40%. Officers all but ceased making traffic stops and patrolling in neighborhoods. Police blame the slowdown on inadequate staffing or officer skittishness following the racial justice uprising, but plenty of people interpret it as a clear threat that any attempt to strip police of power would result in chaos. So slowdown coincided with a spike in violent crime in Minneapolis. Whether or not the slowdown was in any way responsible for the spike, the narrative was a powerful tool for police and their allies in 2021 as Minneapolis prepared to vote on a ballot measure to reject the scandal-plagued police department replace the scandal-plagued police department with a new Department of Public Safety, but voters rejected the measure. It was about 56 to 44, I think was the final split on that one. The story is not unique to Minneapolis. After 2 police officers were killed in New York in 2015, New York police officers virtually stopped making arrests for 2 weeks, which is insane. And I don't think they were even killed by any sort of like activist or anything like that. And after the officer whose chokehold led to Eric Gardner's death was fired, the police officer who murdered Eric Gardner, New York police engaged in a similar slowdown, and Baltimore police did the same after the killing of Freddie Gray led to mass protests. And what these are wildcat police strikes. These are, they are literally saying, when we don't have the power, we will use our role and our position in society that we've created for ourselves by, again, using our power to really slow things down, to make life, more unsafe for you. Like, we will actively now turn away from you when you need help. Which this is a pretty incredible moment here. It shows it's already happening in Chicago, and Johnson is not even in office yet. On Tuesday, WGN reported that a woman had tried to flag down police officers in a squad car to help stop an assault on progress downtown in the midst of a wider aggressive gathering of young people the previous Saturday night. only for officers to literally drive away. The woman, Lenora Dennis, said she drove the couple who had been assaulted to the police station to make a report, where the desk sergeant told her the words to the effect of, "This is happening because Brandon Johnson got elected. I've lived my entire life and would never have expected that," Dennis told WGN. "If there's a precursor to what's about to happen, that's a complete and total problem." If these stories like this gets out, they're getting reported by WGN, local news, like that'll be a big part in making people more aware of what the police actually do. Because I think they're really able to hide behind, violent crimes on the rise. It's because we are literally not doing our jobs. If we can't, over police black people, we're not going to police anybody. Like that is their position there that they're fighting for quite aggressively. And it seems like, hopefully, at least with this Brandon Johnson situation, it gets more and more public and rampant. People will start to notice it, and it'll become a more commonly accepted tactic that police use. Or not accepted, but people will be more commonly aware of it.
MC, make another hit.
This ain't what you want. Project. This ain't what you want. This ain't what you want.
You're listening to Newsflash right here on the Spencer Walsh Radio Network. Help us grow our audience. Subscribe, rate, and review our show on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. Thank you very much. All right. We get to our next story. And we are going to really get really kind of interesting, crazy, and one of those kind of classic mask off stories where we just really see what a lot of people have always kind of expected in the situation. A longtime Republican lawyer who aided former President Donald Trump's effort to overturn the 2020 election told GOP donors that the party should be working to roll back voting on college campuses and other initiatives aimed at expanding ballot access, according to audio obtained by progressive journalist Lauren Windsor. She's a top GOP attorney and fundraiser. Let's take a look at what she had to say at the RNC Donor Retreat. Is what it's called. Let's take a listen.
I think that we can fix a few things in North Carolina, because I think we now have a legislature controlled by the Republicans. If we can persuade the new Republican member to vote with us. But these are statutory changes that we could get done in North Carolina to protect against any of this private money. Because I promise you, Stacey Abrams has been in North Carolina, and we need to make sure that that money is not flowing into Mecklenburg, Durham, and Wake counties. So we need to be looking at what are these college campus locations in Poland. What is this young people effort that they do? They basically put the polling place next to the student dorm, so they just have to roll out of bed, vote, and go back to bed. And we need to build strong election integrity task forces in those counties. Virginia, we have a great task force in every county in Virginia, and we have a great statewide coalition. The governor just signed a bill yesterday that does away with signatures on absentee ballot applications and ballots, and now it has to be the last 4 digits of the Social Security number and a birth year. And we need to make sure that there's transparency and people are watching and verifying. That makes Virginia back in play, frankly, to be able to have some authentication.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really remarkable. They're just saying, like, that is how they view it. That is how they see the situation. Like, they know, and I think that because of their policy positions, because of the way they stand, like, winning majorities in a lot of different places that they really need to win majorities in is going to be very, very hard for them. So what are they going to have to do? They're going to have to suppress. They're going to have to build these, election integrity task forces. What could go wrong? And, of course, yeah, this is what, we all kind of saw coming, but definitely kind of worried about with the situation regarding Trump and Stop the Steal and all that. Because, even if Trump Stop the Steal wasn't really bound for success, this really did unleash. And not to, I think, a lot of people did kind of point this out and see this coming, but it did really lead to a lot of people saying, how do we codify this in the law? How do we, because this election integrity scare, we need to get better at this. We need to pass more, stricter voter ID laws, things that will make it harder for Democrats to vote. And we would use the cover of the fact that, there's been a little bit of election scare. People need to have their faith and trust in the system restored, to get that back. That is definitely what's going on here. And, this should be a pretty clear, this is how they view it. They view it really as the difference between winning or losing, these little tricks they're able to play. And they are, for the most part, right, that it really is the difference. And with that being said, it's all the time I got for today. Thank you so much for joining us. We will be back on Monday. Newsflash.